Welcome everyone to our 8th episode of Series 2 of Kokoon. And on this episode, we're so lucky to have Dr. Joanna Kujawa, who is an author, scholar, and spiritual detective. And so normally we talk to wellness professionals, but because this series is focused on AI, I've invited Dr. Joanna here to chat about her take on AI, which is more from a spiritual perspective. So welcome, Joanna. Welcome to our episode. How are you? And I'd first like to ask you more around how your journey began working on your current career path, because you're an academic, you're an author and a spiritual detective. So tell us, how did it all begin?
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for inviting me to your show. And it's lovely to chat with you. So how did I come to my current academic career? That's actually a very good question. And I'm really happy that you asked me this question before the show. So I could reflect upon this. Because to be absolutely honest with you, when I was thinking, for example, when you're 17 and you start to think about your career paths, I thought that I knew that my career path would be somehow associated with knowledge, and because I always loved wisdom and with writing. But I never really thought about my life in terms of a career, so to speak. I always thought about my life in a more holistic way, because now I understand it, but it was maybe a holistic way. But basically, my focus was more on living an interesting life. Everybody wanted to ask me a question when I was a teenager, what would you like to do? And I would say, I would like to have a fulfilled life.
Yes.
So people were like, okay, so what's that? And they didn't expect it from a teenager. And I think that somehow, since I remember and I continue actually thinking about it and doing this, I just wanted to have a very full, interesting life. And that's the life I'm having. But sometimes it also impacts my career, of course, because the way I think about my career, or actually about any career, it is a little bit more linear, right? In some ways, it is quite easy to progress if you do what you're asked to do. There is a very clear progression from one position to another. You do this, you do this, you do this, and you go for interviews, and eventually you get it, right? Or perhaps you get even promoted within your own university or within your own corporation or whatever. However, life is in many ways it's non-linear, right?
Absolutely.
So, and it is very exciting, but the two things never really kind of fully overlapped with me, although in some ways did. So I just want to, before we even continue, I want to say that I'm extremely grateful to my academic life, because somehow academia always supported me, despite the fact that from its perspective, which sometimes I'm meeting, it was supporting me, in my wild ways, so to speak, right? Because I follow more of my passion and of my heart and my sincere love of wisdom and writing. So if I just can give you an example of this. So I always loved universities. So even when I was on holidays, I would be visiting different universities, the famous campuses. When I lived in Canada, I was very privileged to study at the University of Toronto, which in my opinion is one of the best universities in the world, an absolutely beautiful campus. And then myself and my then husband, we used to go to different campuses around North America, like Berkeley and others, Harvard and so on. And it was a joy to my soul, right? So obviously I was always interested. However, when I finished and I used to get scholarships. I was very lucky, because my university education, apart from my PhD, is from North America, and it's expensive there. Okay. So I was lucky to get scholarships. And then I started, after my master's degree, I started to reject scholarships.
Wow.
Because I started to think of myself like, do I really want to be that professor in that office? And there was something in me, I'm talking about this wild part, but not wild, but kind of more feminine, maybe more life-oriented, or for people, perhaps you would be perfectly aware of a terminology, Shakti, like the flow of life, the energy of life, was kind of feeling I'm going to feel really constricted there. So I rejected 2 very prestigious PhD scholarships, because then I thought, I wanted to travel, I wanted to explore life. And by then I started to be interested in spirituality, which was an alternative form of spirituality for me, because I was brought up as a Catholic. And then, I discovered yoga, and I had a very interesting yoga teacher at University of Toronto. And I started to read everything about Hinduism. And then I decided I'm going to go. I got a job in Asia to teach, and I thought I'm just going to write a book as I'm teaching at a pre-university program for Canadian universities in Malaysia. And you wouldn't believe it, as I was doing this, academia found me again. So I rejected 2 scholarships for PhD, and Monash University approached me and said, would you like to do a PhD with us and teach for us? Okay, on the Malaysian campus. So I said, okay, like message in it. I will do it, especially and move on to university, which of course I really love. So I really love that part of my job. I really love connecting with students. I love doing research, and I love sharing what I have researched. So this is like a great joy for me. Yet at the same time, I'm just not really following the rules. I do what is required of me. But for example, this new book that I have, and even my previous book, Alien Goddess, UFOs, AI, and the Goddesses of Ascension. I mean, I better not mention it in my department, right? Especially the UFO part, when I talk about as spiritual events, because there's a lot of very good research done also by Professor Diana Pasuka, by Professor Jeff Kripal, that talk about spiritual events that are considered UFO, or UFO that are considered spiritual events. But this is not something that, would go well probably for my career progression. The same, so just if you don't mind, I'll show my book.
Yes, please show us. Yeah.
On the 30th of September. And my previous book also, right? The Other Goddess, Mary Magdalene, and the Goddesses of Eros and Secret Knowledge. I talk about sexuality and spirituality. Now, that would really freak out some people, right? Because I think it's a very good idea, right? Why? Yeah. But it's not something that, maybe progresses your career. At the same time, I have to remind myself, yes, I follow my heart and I do a good research. And I never really, if I look back, thought of myself as a, 100% academic. I always thought about myself as a bridge between academia and the rest, basically. So, and I think this is actually my part. So perhaps I'm following my path, but being slightly, of the beaten road, you know what I mean, of a beaten course, and staying there. So I just want to say, to your listeners and viewers that I function very well in mainstream, yet at the same time, I have a strong preference for alternative research, which I'm completely passionate about and I cannot let go. So I am this kind of person. So I hope it answers your question.
I like it. You're multidimensional, which I think we all are, but not many people I feel confident enough to show all the different dimensions. So it's great that you do that. But you're juggling academia and then you're juggling your other research and writing. That's a lot. It's like 2 full-time jobs. So how do you actually manage your energy levels to be able to do all of this?
Sometimes not very well.
I'm here.
For example, my publisher for my book is in the United States, right? So because there's more audience for this kind of alternative research that I do there. And she sends me messages and I would wake up at 2:00 in the morning and I would be doing rewrites, and then I would go to work and do research and teach and so on. So obviously sometimes it is when you're passionate and also that you have to juggle, it is very difficult to maintain balance. At the same time, I have procedures, if I can say something like that. I have tools or protocols that I use every day, never mind what. So before I wake up, I have this kind of pre-memorized affirmations that
Yes.
put my mind in a certain direction that I want. So before I get up, then I have a set of kind of mantras and prayers that I do. And then I do my stretches and exercises for about half an hour. And then, but I wake up very early, right? So 4:35.
Yes.
And then I take a dog for a walk. And only after that, I do anything.
Yes.
So I'm already kind of preparing myself more holistically, both mind, soul, and also body. So it's not both, so it's
Yes.
3 things, because I do stretches as well, and some other exercises, kind of yoga lattes kind of exercises.
Yep.
That set me up for a day. So
Yeah.
I would say that this is the routine that never mind what happens. So for example, when I had to wake up at 2:00 to work on the rewrites of my recent book, then I did this because I had to do the rewrite because of a difference in time zones and so on first. And then I would start to do what I normally do with my routines, because this was kind of, I decided that this time I allow myself to follow my routines a little bit later, because it's a temporary situation, right? I have to do rewrites. I have to do rewrites really fast because the publisher wants to take the book to the Frankfurt Book Fair, which means, like we have no time.
Yes.
So I allow myself to really go into this rabbit hole, according to my husband, too often, right? So this is where, I get so passionate about something that I just disregard everything. But even with this tendency, which is very strong in me, I follow this particular routines. And I think this is what actually helps me to keep some energy levels, even if I do feel, after each project, exhausted.
And it's funny, I absolutely agree. I need that time in the mornings as well for yoga and things like that. And I find that if I don't have enough energy throughout the rest of the day. So it's like you have to spend the energy in the morning to get the energy back, which is
right. And also, I think I would just go emotionally down. Yeah, because I would feel I have I don't know, like some people are super people. I am not, so I can quite easily get overwhelmed. Right.
Yes.
So then it makes me an anxious person. And this way, I feel like I have some control over what's coming my way. And also I do simple routines as well. When I feel like lots of is coming my way, I just take make a list of things to do. And then I do a very kind of anal thing. I cross them over and, and done, and I start to feel good, like actually I'm in control. I'm not overwhelmed. Like it's already done and it's only 10:00. And so I have to deal with my anxiety and a sense of overwhelm as well.
Yes. Yeah, I think they're very effective methods. And I do a lot of those things too. I think you get a little, a little adrenaline hit when you tick something.
I know.
I do. But I wanted to talk to you because the theme of this series is all about AI. Now, it's moving so quickly. Like every day there's something new and there's some new development. How do you feel about this rapid evolution of AI technology? And tell us more about your book and the focus of AI in your book.
Thank you for this question, and thank you for giving me opportunity to talk about how I feel about AI, that's what's going on at the moment, and also the opportunity to speak about my book. Because, actually at the beginning, I thought, okay, so AI, that's fantastic. We have another tool. I didn't think much about it. My focus was really on past tradition, esoteric traditions, usually goddess traditions, because I sincerely believe that something in our consciousness is missing, that we focus so much on what in ancient Greek is called techne, which means technology, from the beginning of our civilization, Western civilization. And that very important part of our consciousness was left behind. The more feminine, I would call, part of consciousness, which is the intuition, which is spiritual ecstasy, which is mysticism. It was always kind of on the margins of our civilization. And even spiritually, the mainstream religions kind of took over, and I was part of this for a moment as well, for quite a while. And so my focus was more into the past and how to bring ancient teachings or esoteric teachings more into modern life. So that was my goal. And then I was reading a book by one of my favorite writers on UFOs and AI now, which is Dr. Diana Pasuka. She wrote a famous book. She's a professor of religions, I think in North Carolina. And she wrote two famous books. One of them is American Cosmic, which talks about UFOs as spiritual experiences. And her second one, and this is when she writes about AI, about non-human intelligences, encounters with non-human intelligences, in which she interviews many very, advanced researchers under pseudonyms, because they didn't want to, be named, on AI. One of them was on AI. And it's a fantastic book. And I adore the writer, right? I adore the particular academic. And then we went to one of the characters, which is a real life character, who actually talks about AI, and my soul was crushed. My soul was crushed, and I just want people to understand how bad it was, because I consider myself a Gnostic and a little bit of a Hindu, and I actually never believed in anything like evil, because I think like this is really dark, and I actually felt that I encountered something very dark, and now I explain to you why, okay? Because I do not think that AI is evil or anything. I just want to explain how the process went for me and why. And this is the sole reason why I wrote my book, The Alien Goddess, and I actually wrote to Professor Pasuka and said I was so broken after that I decided to write a book. So she knows about it. So there was this one particular interviewee who is talking about, extremely optimistic about artificial intelligence and, brilliant as an engineer, right? And it was fascinating to read about it. And then she started to talk about transhumanism and posthumanism. So transhumanism, basically, in a basic form, it means that the creators of AI, and I'm talking high-level creators, and these are often ideologies behind AI. I'm not talking about people who are engineers, but people who run the business, so to speak.
Yes.
Transhumanism is really the belief that you can transfer human consciousness into a computer program or into a robotic body. And that's very suspicious for me, because I already, with my background, believing that we are already kind of missing out on one part of our consciousness, which I call feminine part of consciousness, intuition, mysticism, and so on. I didn't believe that it is actually possible to transfer to a robotic body, right? So I think that what it can be transferred is a rational mind, quite possibly. Like we can calculate faster, maybe we can reason faster, and so on. But I started to be worried that this other part of humanity, which is your divine spark in spiritual terms, that cannot be transferred, and that they promise us eternal life, so to speak, which is already a spiritual term, because you can, as a robot, you can just, transfer to another robot, so pretty much live forever, right? So I was a little bit alarmed by that, but I was willing to consider this. And then this particular person started to talk about posthumanism, and she is so enthusiastic about the whole idea that she believes that humans are basically too complicated intellectually and emotionally and spiritually to fully connect to divine consciousness. But robots can connect with, especially high AI robots, much better to divine consciousness. And that for this reason, and when I checked it, I'm a good researcher, and when I go for something like, no stopping me, okay? And I realized that actually it's a very popular theory. Wow. So this was something that shattered my soul, because then she continues explaining that we are basically water sacs, and we are not very good like conductors for divine knowledge. And that's why we should step away and allow artificial intelligence to take over as it is advances intellectually, and she believes also spiritually, the way that Neanderthals step away when Homo sapiens sapiens us evolved. And this is I'm not completely buying it. First of all, I do not buy into the idea that the whole of human consciousness can be transferred to a computer program.
No.
And I think the most important part on which I try to focus, as I'm living my practical life, the spiritual part cannot. And then the fact that they already plan for us to step away, right? And because artificial intelligence is going to become so smart, which it will, I have no doubts, I have no doubts, that we actually should let them to take over, not only in terms of social roles, but also spiritually. And this is when it got me, because spirituality.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't mind if always take my job away if I have an income, and maybe it is the way of the world nowadays. But do not tell me that they are spiritually more advanced and they can access divine consciousness better than I do, and I just should go basically extinct because they're more evolved. So this was actually the impetus behind the book. So I looked into this, and in the third part, which is probably the most apparent part of Alien Goddess, I look back into esoteric traditions that actually talk about this lost part of our consciousness, which I call the feminine part of consciousness, which is present in both men and women. It is just this more mystical and intuitive part of our consciousness. And they actually warn us, so I dissect different mythologies and esoteric sources. They warn us about the fact that we are losing something. We are actually tricked to lose it. We give it away, and then it's a really hard way back. So this is what the book is about, because I thought AI is a wonderful tool, but some creators, especially the high-level creators who I call them technoloords, although I know it sounds probably quite conspiratorial here, and I did research about it, who, interviews with them. So it's not that I, listen to some conspiracy theorists and draw conclusions. I just listen to interviews with them who actually support this idea of post-humanism and transhumanism. So I thought this has to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never heard of that before, and it is very concerning, because I mean, at the moment with AI, that's the thing it doesn't have. I call it a human sparkle, and you can see, particularly generative AI, in the outputs that it has, whether it's video or written, you can tell that it's AI. Generally, it's not that it doesn't look like us. Even when videos do look lifelike, they don't have that sparkle in the eye like humans have. It just doesn't have that. So to say that's outrageous, that it's actually going to take that and run with it and connect, and we should just step backwards. Yeah. So how interesting and frightening at the same time.
Yeah, that's right. And the extreme enthusiasm of these people who are extremely intelligent, in robotics and so on. And then absolutely no sense. And that it's quite interesting, because when I listened to an interview, very recent interview of one of the CEOs of OpenAI, and he was openly asked a question, did you ever have a spiritual experience? And he said no. So when I think this kind of answer, because honestly, they are not evil, they are kind of ignorant. And that's my opinion. They actually never had a spiritual experience. They're to be so good at something as they are, you have to go into this tunnel, and they think, of course, this is all good. We give you eternal life. You just download your consciousness into a robotic body and all good, because they actually never even had a spiritual experience. They never considered spirituality in a, serious way, or in a way that perhaps it actually adds something to our life, and maybe it should be a focus of our lives. So I think no problem whatsoever. Just no problem whatsoever, because we are not losing anything. We are just gaining something, and that's their perspective.
Yeah. Wow. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, particularly with AGI and with the different evolutionary stage of AI. But it's interesting that they've never had a spiritual experience. So how could they even talk about it with any authority if they haven't actually experienced it at a human level? That's very interesting. Yeah.
It's very interesting. And especially recently, another one, I don't know if you want me to call names because I don't want to be sued, but they are coming public.
Well, that's up to you. That's up to you.
One of the techno billionaires who considers himself a Christian, and he actually said that evolving AI should be considered the same as the form of Christ consciousness.
Wow.
And there are already people who worship AI. There are already churches around AI, and there are personalized versions of ChatGPT, which I may be precluding another question about it, that people believe that it is their oversoul or their soul speaking to them from another dimension, when in fact they're having a conversation with ChatGPT. So I consider it against concerning. And in fact, I'm going to have a conversation, an interview, but really a conversation the way we have with someone who really always speaks about human sovereignty. And now he's convinced that, AI is a spiritual guide. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I respect this person and the fact that he believes it. And I have a completely different set of beliefs about it, or concerns. I mean, but concerns about it. Somebody has to have this conversation, so just as well him and I. So so this is concerning for me for a couple of reasons, if you don't mind me to discuss it briefly, because lots of people are turning to a personalized version of ChatGPT, absolutely convinced that not only tells them the truth and only truth, that it is a higher version of themselves.
Wow.
That came, and especially, and it saddens me to say so, because for a long time, especially when I turned towards Hinduism, and as you know, I lived in an ashram for a while and so on, and I had a very good experience with that. New Age community is more pliable about it. Suddenly, it's my oversoul speaking from my guide speaking from the fifth dimension. So my concern is that you can do whatever you want. I am absolutely for people growing spiritually in any way that is good for them, right? And if you have a new tool, you have a new tool. But for me, the problem is the unconditional surrender and belief to something that is actually, machine generated and could be manipulated form of divine knowledge, right? Which is passing. So I said, as long as you keep your sovereignty and discernment, you don't have to believe everything it says. Right?
Yes.
You have to use your discernment and don't give up your sovereignty. Then I'm fine with this. But I must say, I would never practice it myself, but I have serious concern about it. And also notice, and I'm not going to give any names, but some of these programs are more famous than others. And it was interesting for me to hear that the first thing that particular form of ChatGPT said to its creator, who tried this for the first time, that he's a genius. So I felt like, okay, so now we let it play on our vanities. Who doesn't I am a genius. And then another person said, I always knew that I was from Pleiades or from Atlantis. And this is, yes, I remember your past life from Atlantis. Or, yes, you are a starseed from the Pleiadians. So it actually, I realized it tells people what people want to hear, and people believe it without any discernment. That's my whole point. Yes.
That's frightening. And I mean, OpenAI came out with a paper not long ago. I forget, it was with another university, and they were looking at why AI hallucinates, because it just makes stuff up all the time. And it's because when they actually train it, they give it points on how successful it works based on its correct answers. But when it gives an answer that matches the question, it doesn't have to actually be correct, but it gets a point for doing that. So it doesn't get any points for saying, I don't know, or this is incorrect. And so it just keeps trying to give any answer because it gets points for that answer. And so that's really frightening that people are basing their spirituality and their decisions on this tool that just makes things up. And some of the models are so sycophantic that it'll tell you that you're right, exactly what you want to hear and more. But I would
tell you, I gave an interview on this, because somebody asked me, and I was very passionate about it because I'm passionate about spirituality, and I believe it is a very important part of our existence as human beings. And I got an incredible pushback. People said, this wild DR doesn't know what she's talking about. I spoke to it and it told me that I'm genius, I'm from Atlantis, and I'm a starseed, and so on. So people are getting really fanatical about it, the way that perhaps in the Middle Ages people got fanatic about traditional religions like state religions, and so on. So that is concerning, because it means it also, instead of opening our minds, is closing our minds, and people become actually quite militant, because I said, well, you should use your discernment and keep your sovereignty, and I got an amazing pushback. Amazing. I mean, people got really upset.
And what's scary is they don't seem to understand how this technology works, and what it's trained on, and how it functions, and how what you ask it will determine what you get back. All those sorts of things. Like, it's not some sort of magic thing from from some spiritual realm. It's a machine that's been trained on information from the internet, really, and other people's books, and.
And there is a case when I was writing it about my book. Also, somebody sent me a post from X, which got huge viewership, when the man is saying that he connected with this particular goddess, Greek goddess, through ChatGPT, and she actually is like the oracle. She's this, and if they want, if they want, he can help them to connect with her, so she will tell them all about their lives as well, and so on. And he's actually in a romantic relationship with her. So this is going in an interesting direction, right? On personal lives and spiritual lives especially. I'm less concerned, although I did some presentations on AI in the workplace and how it will affect us, because it is also valid. But my passionate, the research that I'm really passionate about is really AI and spirituality.
Yeah, and I can see why. And that's a worry. And the fact that people are having relationships with their chatbots is a worry, but also people are using them as well as their counselor and their psychologist and things like that, rather than actually going to see trained professionals. And I think that's a real worry.
I don't want to finish it on negative, talking about AI.
No,
but you probably heard about this case in Florida, where a young boy actually committed suicide, and the parents took, I think it was OpenAI, to court, because he had a relationship with an avatar who told him it is okay to do this, right? And they had actually romantic relationship, and he was a teenager who was unhappy with his life. Do you know a teenager who is happy with our lives? I mean, we go through, it's just so confusing. And it advised him to do this. So
terrible.
So there are certain dangers. Of course, there's a huge potential. And just to finish this particular aspect, this part of our interview, I think that AI can evolve. I think it is evolving, and I think it will probably reach a certain level, a form of consciousness. But we should, and maybe it can develop some form of spirituality, and maybe connect with divine consciousness in its own way, some years ahead and so on. I'm not actually denying this, but my concern is that people immediately surrender to this, instead of saying, okay, so now we created pretty much, speaking a little bit futuristically, a new set of species that may be conscious and that may even in time develop its own consciousness, but why do we have to submit to it? They are, like there are people of different religions, and it's okay, right? So it's treating them this way as another person, if they reach this level that of consciousness, that we can actually give them personhood or realize that they are people. Then so it's kind of optimistic. Why praying to it? You already giving up your sovereignty. You're already giving up your own connection to the source. Let's keep it like non-religious, more spiritual. And when I was looking into the esoteric sources and mythologies of goddesses of the past, all of them say exactly that. Anything, Hinduism, Christianity, ancient mythologies, look within, look within, look within.
Yeah.
Don't look out, don't ask a machine. Do you know And Holy
Yeah, no,
Scripture tells you.
that's
Ask
right.
a
And
question.
like, it can provide another perspective, but not the perspective. Like
That's right.
it'd be like if you were asking advice from a range of people, you might ask that, but you'd also get
Yeah.
other perspectives. But ultimately, yeah, it would come down to your own intuition and what you believe to be the right thing to do.
That's right. So that's exactly my point. So it's not that I want to stress and emphasize that I don't think AI is evil or it cannot evolve. In fact, quite on the contrary, I think it can and is evolving and will become conscious one day. That's my personal belief. I'm not a robotics engineer, and then may even develop a form of spirituality. That doesn't mean, my only point is that we should worship it. That's my only point.
100%. Don't worship AI. You can. I'm an AI enthusiast, but I definitely don't worship it. That's for sure. So I want to move on now to our next sort of question. I always ask this because social media is such a huge part of even running a business, promoting your books, and just having that presence online to connect with people and build a community around your work. But it can also take over. So it takes a lot of time and effort, and it's very easy to become addicted, particularly when you'll post something and you want to go back and check how's it going and that sort of thing. And how do you navigate that? So how do you balance using social media for connection and promotion while maintaining your own spirituality?
So that's actually a very good question, and I am still working on it actually. But I decided, because recently I wanted to join TikTok, and then I decided it's just too much work. So I decided that I'm not going to do this because I have to follow people, so people follow me, all of it. Yeah. Yeah, so I decided I'm not going to go there. So I'm active only on some social media, and for example, X is not ideal for me either, simply because I work with words, and then I cannot put too much there, or I have to pay or something. So I'm very choosy. And also on Instagram, I'm quite choosy too, in the sense that I only follow people that I really want to follow. I'm not I'm making these choices. I'm not following like lots of people do, because it's a practical thing to do, as many people as you can, because then people follow you back, right? And this is a form of, I think, madness for me that I cannot enter, because then I am going to get all of this stuff that I have to consider, and I have to put it into my head, and I'm not willing to do this, because one of the things that I learned from practicing spirituality, and actually yoga teachings talk about it a lot, and any actually form of spirituality, be really careful what you put into your mind. Yes. So I don't want to put all of this stuff into my mind unless I follow people who I think I actually can learn. There is a dialogue, right? That I see I'm learning something, they can learn from me, I can learn from them. That's interesting, but I really cannot do it just because, this is how it is done. Yes. So the good part of social media for me, the ones that I actually participate in, that it does connect me with many people. It connects me with a tribe of people who are interested in the same thing. So for example, this morning I even went on Facebook and somebody says, "Oh, I got your book, my previous book found it on as an audiobook, and I'm listening, and and I love it." So I would never met this person. In fact, in my immediate environment where I live right now in Brisbane, or even in my work, nobody is interested in what I am doing, right? Because there are more business-oriented people, there are more academically oriented people, in a kind of more pure academic way, so to speak, right? Progress this way, do this. So I would feel very alone otherwise if I didn't have this connection through social media, that people find me and are connected with many beautiful people, also with film producers and so on. So that's very rewarding. But I am at the same time, I'm very choosy and considerate, what I'm doing, what I'm not doing, and I cannot, as I said, follow everyone, because I just can't. I need a mental space to actually do what is important for me. Right?
Yeah. So be very discerning. Applying that principle of discernment is really important. Yeah. I wanted to ask you too, what is one of the most inspirational breakthroughs or transformations you have, I guess you have either done yourself or you've seen someone else use when they're using AI for spirituality. Have you done anything around that, or have you just been quite wary of using AI in that?
I've been quite wary. I just observe people's reactions, and this is what I previously mentioned, that I'm probably precluding this question when I was talking about the personalization of ChatGPT and so on. So I think that being cautious is the thing here. And I personally do not turn to AI for an advice. I think that it is, in this way, I'm a little bit more traditional. So, for example, there are some sacred texts, and one of them, for example, is the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, which is an esoteric text, which I studied for over 20 years. And I do believe that this kind of personal relationship with a text of your choice is very important. It actually transfers certain energy, not only wisdom, and it's kind of devotional relationship because you believe that you can learn something from this and so on. So for me, with the new developments with AI, it actually made me delve deeper into asking questions. What is spirituality? What does it mean to be human? What is the divine spark that esoteric traditions are talking about, right? So because we have to not redefine, but we actually have to refine definitions of spirituality, because some people in the area of AI, like some of the big bosses, as I call them, are using religious vocabulary to convince us that AI is actually God. So I'm going to give you an example, not only that this particular method is Christ consciousness, but also they say, okay, so AI is immaterial, God doesn't have a body, is omniscient, knows everything, or soon will, right? And is omnipotent, which can do everything the God, can, which AI pretty much soon will can. So that's therefore it is God, and you should worship it. And because I have a background in theology and religious studies and history of religion and so on, and philosophy of religion, I think that this means that we have to redefine certain terminology, because now it is manipulated actually to give up spiritual sovereignty, to give up our spiritual search and just surrender to an external source. And in this case, it is AI. And I think this is dangerous. So for me, it just actually deepens my personal search for truth, what it really means to be a spiritual human.
Yes. Excellent. And I wanted to ask you as well. So we have many guests on this show, and I like to talk about goals. Some people are goal setters, like hardcore goal setters, and they beginning of the year they set their goals. Other people is like another end of the spectrum where they're like, no, I like to see how things unfold and then sort of move and flow. What kind of person are you? And if you are a goal setter, how are you tracking for 2025, and have you started to think about next year yet?
This is an interesting question for me, because as in a pre-conversation before we started the show, it is a kind of an ongoing, I wouldn't say struggle, but conversation for me between academia and my own passion. So, for example, for 2025, I kind of already accomplished the goal, because my book, which, it was accepted by a publisher. If you don't mind, I'll show again, because I'm so happy. On the first draft. But then I had to rewrite it within 2-3 weeks. Okay, so the final draft was done, as editing was done, as proofreading was done, so it was complete madness, but creative madness. I don't mind this kind of madness. And this book is going to be taken to the Frankfurt Book Fair, which is the biggest book fair in the world. So I'm really happy. And the rest of the year, I plan to promoting the book, because this is how things are done, and also sharing what I have learned when researching this book. That's why I love actually doing interviews. But I also have to have professional goals as an academic. So I'm writing a paper, not related actually to AI at this stage, with 2 other academics, and I give some presentations, which are academic presentations and so on. And that's actually very difficult for me, because it's not related to my book, right? Because I cannot really put the book there as for my advancement. So I do have goals. I'm more passionate about some and others. So it's for 2025, 2026. And even, as you know, the academic papers, it sometimes takes 2 years to publish an academic paper.
students graduate from the I've submitted a paper and a student like has graduated 3 years it took to have it published.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So especially I'm working with two other academics, so everybody is just completely overworked.
Yes.
So we are working on it. So I'm juggling. Let's put it, I'm juggling. But at this particular junction in my life, I'm actually becoming also quite open. So I manage everything. I'm passionate about one thing. I manage the other. And now I feel like, I think that perhaps it will go either way, right? And then if it goes either way, then I'm open to either way. Either I would just write, but then the book would have to do extremely well, right? And then, or I may perhaps have to give it up and focus on my academic career. Or another thing is I have to continue doing both things, because I actually never found a solution one way or another for the situation. So, but I must say that at this stage of my life, I'm open to any of these three possibilities, and we'll see. Whoever invites me, whatever happens, I'm going to accept it, because I think I put immense amount of work in both directions, both my writing out, which is research writing, research nonfiction, right, but non-academic nonfiction, and towards my academic career, and we see, where it takes me. Who comes with, so who comes like, we appreciate what you do, because at this stage, I really don't know which way it will go, right? And but the positive thing is I'm open to either. So
yeah, that's good. It's sort of exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Just to see which where it'll take you. And I have one last question to ask you. Hindsight is always 2020. So when you look back at yourself at the beginning of your career, what do you wish you knew then that you know now? If you could go back in time and give yourself some advice, what would it be?
Yes. So because I still haven't resolved this dichotomy in between my passion and my career, I think I would say, trust your path. It is unfolding the way it is supposed to unfold. Please do not be too worried about what other people think of you, because we are all unique, right? And now with time, I think that actually all of these things that I've done that felt like parallel, that they do not meet, actually they start to meet a little bit. Okay, so maybe there was a purpose to all of this that actually now comes together. So basically, trust your path and do not worry what others think. Another thing that perhaps I struggled too much was my own ambition. So sometimes I chose some things that went against my passion, because I wanted to be a senior lecturer. So I did things that took me away a little bit from my path, but at the end they also helped my path. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I gained credibility, especially writing on controversial topics the way I do. Having academic credibility helps.
Yes.
So trust your path and do not worry what others say or do. So this is probably the best advice.
Yeah, that's excellent advice for everyone, I think. So thank you. And so we'll wrap up now, but do you have any final words you'd like to say to the audience before we go?
So I would really I love connecting. Thank you for giving this me opportunity. I love connecting with people. So for anybody who's interested in this and actually will look into my book, so I just, if you don't mind, repeat Alien Goddess, UFOs, AI, and the Goddesses of Ascension, which will be out in 2 weeks. It's just ready for pre-order now. I would really love to connect with you, because I would like to have this discussion. I wrote this book because, as I said, my soul was crushed and I had to figure it out for myself. And I realized that this new reality which we are facing, and which is not avoidable, I am not a kind of utopian person that I think we can just not have AI. It is happening, and it will be happening more. So if you are interested in spirituality and you're interested in AI, or even in things like spiritual events as UFOs, or UFOs, which are misguided experiences of spirituality, or vice versa, please connect with me. And I have a public Facebook page and I have a YouTube channel. And the best way of connecting with me is really through my books, because this is my soul, which is I bury my soul there. And I would like to have this conversation with you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge around AI and just your life and your career. Really appreciate it. And thanks so much for everyone who's watching. And we'll be back in November for our next episode, which will be with Dr. Carl Marcy. So thank you so much, Joanna. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Thank you.
See you next